To me, a grand hotel is a magical venue. It's a place of romance, a place of glamour, a place of excitement, a place where all the ordinary rules of life are suspended just a bit. I think most aficionados would agree to be a truly grand hotel, you have to have majestic, awe-inspiring architecture, rich classical furnishings, unique meeting space and dining venues, and a history of famous and sometimes infamous guests.
It's the Palmer House, the Drake, and the Hilton Chicago in the television special Chicago's Grand Hotels, based on the book Chicago's Grand Hotels.
Chicago's grand hotels are really the people's palaces. They are a collective living room for our city. There's no more than a handful of these hotels left in the country, and Chicago is very fortunate to have 3 of them.
The history of the Palmer House goes back to 1871, but it moves back a little bit further with Potter Palmer coming to Chicago from Albany, New York, to set up a dry goods store.
After Palmer sold his dry goods store to an upstart named Marshall Field, he decided to make a muddy lane called State Street, the glittering center of Chicago. Palmer built and presented the woman he loved, Bertha Honoré, with what was to be the very first Palmer House.
She was a person of French ancestry and loved all things French, and is the reason that over time the Palmer House architecturally, in terms of design, is French. 13 days after they moved in, the Great Chicago Fire not only destroyed the Palmer House, but just about every major building in the city of Chicago.
But Potter Palmer, not being one to be easily deterred, went out and negotiated. At the time, it was the largest loan given to a private individual, $1.7 million, to build the second Palmer House, which was bigger and better than the first and was fireproof, amongst other novelties.
The most famous first at the Palmer House was the building of a vertical railroad, more commonly called the elevator. That hotel existed until 1925, when the third Palmer House was completed.
But the second Palmer House was raised and the third Palmer House built in halves. So the hotel never closed, allowing it to claim that it's the oldest hotel in continual operation in North America. No less a journalistic authority than George F. Will referred to the lobby of the Palmer House as the essence of lobbiness. And he actually compared it to the ceiling of the Palmer House lobby to the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican.
It was done by Louis-Pierre Regal in 1899. It's composed of 21 individual paintings, each depicting Greek mythology. It's clearly a masterwork, and we're very proud to say it is the signature for the entire hotel.
Another signature of the Palmer House is the Empire Room, which began in 1927 as the dining room of the third Palmer House. Then in 1933, with famous people from around the world attending the Century of Progress, they made it a supper club featuring big-name entertainment.
I used to sing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. That was my first star billing. And then the Palmer House said, we want her, we want her. So I used to throw out diamonds to the people. Fritz told me before he died that every time they cleaned the chandeliers in the Empire Room, they got dozens of my diamonds out of the chandeliers. I wonder if they're still there.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Carol Channing played the Empire Room more than any other entertainer. She was joined by the likes of Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Eartha Kitt, and many more stars, including Jimmy Durante.
The first benefit I ever did was in the Empire Room, and Jimmy was there at the piano, and he was looking over. I was just new to stardom, and he looked at the piano and said, "What is this? Diamonds are a girl's best friend? What kind of music?" And he threw it into the audience. Then he said, "What's this?" "Oh, a little girl from Little Rock," and he threw it into the audience. And I came out, all my diamonds regalia, and I came out and said, "Wait a minute," and I was trying to get my music together. I hadn't gone on yet. So I ran out into the audience and begged the people, "Can you give me back my music? Give me back my music." Do you know I never went over so well? They always say never follow a hit act. He was the biggest hit in the Empire Room. Boy, he had energy. Always follow a hit act. Jimmy made me go over like Knishes on Coney Island.
Every Broadway, every Hollywood, every radio, every super celebrity wanted to play the Empire Room in Chicago.
Chicago's answer to the Rockettes were the Abbott Dancers, named for producer and choreographer Muriel Abbott. They performed at the Empire Room for 30 years. Liberace was an unknown piano player who started his career playing cocktail hour in the Empire Room. And an 18-year-old Evanston native named Bob Fosse danced for Muriel Abbott long before he conquered Broadway and Hollywood. But it's not just celebrities who are regulars at the Palmer House. Politicians have long frequented the Chicago hotel the world knows best. And for the last 68 years, many of them have had their shoes shined by a Chicago favorite, Clarence Allen.
This is like home to me. Yeah. When you spend as much time any place as I spend in this place, you gotta love it. All the people I work with, I must at least work for 50 different people, bosses, and I got along with everyone and they got along with me.
A newer tradition just 23 years old and counting is the annual Tuba Christmas, a creative melodic holiday celebration that has become a popular must-hear in Chicago.
The way I analogize it, it's like taking a great big bulldog and asking it to do a pirouette. It's 400 tubas in the middle of the hotel playing Christmas carols.
While the Palmer House has always benefited from its enviable location in the heart of the city, the Drake was built at what was considered the uppermost corner of downtown. A look at one of the nation's first urban resorts when Chicago's Grand Hotels returns.
In addition to the magnificent architecture and its fabulous location and its rich history, I think what makes the Drake particularly special is that it's always been this charming combination of the contemporary and the classical.
In 1920, architect Ben Marshall convinced brothers John and Tracy Drake to build their new namesake hotel at the intersection of Lakeshore Drive and what was then called Upper Michigan Avenue. The location was far from the bustle of the city, allowing it to be publicized as one of the nation's first urban resorts, due in part to its sitting opposite Oak Street Beach.
One of the early ads showed that horseback riding was one of the entertainments offered in a hotel. And the late actor Peter Ustinov said famously once, his quote was, "Walking in the Drake is like walking on diamonds," to illustrate the value of the land where the Drake is located.
It cost $10 million to build and originally had 900 employees serving 800 guest rooms. Throughout the 1920s, the Drake's reputation for elegance gained worldwide prominence. In 1924, Queen Mary and her son, His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, later known as the Duke of Windsor, stayed at the Drake, establishing an 81-year tradition of serving as Chicago's home to Britain's royal family.
The Drake was simply the most opulent hotel in Chicago when it opened in 1920, and the British consulate recognized it as such and advised the royals at the time that there was no other suitable accommodation in Chicago but the Drake.
The Drake Hotel is certainly the one hotel in Chicago that really has an English feel to it. Certainly like the Dorchester, Claridge's, the Langham Hotel. It's a hotel that prides itself on really truly first-class service and exquisite decor, and certainly makes its guests extremely welcome.
As the premier luxury hotel in Chicago, the Drake was always looking to better its services. By 1950, it was the first Chicago hotel to have air conditioning in all guest rooms. It was also the first to offer color televisions in guest rooms.
But the hotel has always retained what are seeming anachronisms because it was felt that they could deliver better service to the guests that way. And until 1967, the Drake refused to purchase ice machines until the quality of the ice machines was comparable to the quality of the handmade ice cubes of the Drake.
This alluring combination of new amenities mingling with tradition is evidenced today in many of the Drake's most popular venues.
The Cape Cod is and was always famous for the freshest seafood. Opened in 1933, this was the first themed restaurant in America. You can find old favorites there like the Dover sole, the famous bookbinder's soup, the clam chowder soup, and many other seafood specialties.
The Coq d'Or is a very special bar, tavern, and restaurant, and holds one of the oldest liquor licenses in Chicago.
Come on, face it, fool! Them things are big. Oh.
The Palm Court is probably the place in Chicago where one can enjoy and celebrate the tradition of English afternoon tea.
Well, certainly afternoon tea is one of the great English traditions, and I think it's a tradition that the Drake Hotel has embraced really to a T, forgive the pun. I mean, they put on a splendid high tea every afternoon.
The Camellia House was a supper club with entertainment. It was open for about 40 years. The band leader who had his band there was the famous Dick Judson, a legend in Chicago.
I got a call and they said, let's come in for 3 weeks. And I stayed and it kept going on and on and on. I stayed for close to 10 years, 9, 10 years. And it was the best job I ever had. And one night this gentleman came up to me and said, I was on break, and he said, I'm sure you know this new song called Send in the Clowns. And I said, oh God, I don't think my guys are going to be able to fake it. So I said, he said, what if $100 a guy, would that be a nice tip to start? So he gave me 6 $100, I had a 6-piece band, and I said, guys, we gotta start on this break learning the song Send in the Clowns. So we start the next set, and we played it, and something happened that it just became, it was just a song that I love to play.
The Drake has been immortalized in films. Tom Cruise first took up residence there in Risky Business, while Julia Roberts chased after Dermot Mulroney in My Best Friend's Wedding. And hardly a day goes by that a momentous occasion isn't celebrated at the Drake. Just like the Palmer House and the Hilton Chicago, the Drake has, since its inception, hosted Chicagoans' most special events, their weddings, birthdays, and parties with elegance and style. Perhaps the most well-publicized stay at the Drake took place 10 years ago.
Princess Di visited Chicago in June 1996 and stayed for 3 nights in the hotel.
When talking to employees that served her at the time, the one thing that is most evident is the princess's kindness. She was always very kind to all of the employees, and really, unfortunately, also her loneliness. On a couple of occasions, she had invited guests of the hotel to take a meal with her or just to talk with her a bit, because of course, she was famous and also lonely at the same time.
7 years after the Drake opened its doors, Chicago welcomed another grand hotel to Michigan Avenue, this time on the south side of the boulevard. Learn all about what was the largest hotel in the world next, when Chicago's Grand Hotels continues.
The world had never seen anything quite like the Hilton, or the Stevens as it was known then when it opened. It was considered such a spectacular achievement, the largest hotel in the world, 3,000 rooms, that the first registered guest of the hotel was the Vice President of the United States, who came from Washington to preside over the opening.
What the Vice President and others found when they came to the Stevens in 1927 was a virtual city within a city, with all the amenities necessary to make it completely self-sufficient.
The Hilton, when it opened, had its own library, its own 1,200-seat movie theater with talking motion picture equipment, which was the state of the art for that day, and an 18-hole miniature golf course on the roof, the Hi-Ho Golf Course.
What distinguishes the Chicago Hilton is it's part of the Chicago skyline. When you look at the skyline from the lake, it starts with Soldier Field, and it then goes to the Chicago Hilton, and goes right up the line. And everything that happens in Chicago happens at the Hilton Chicago.
Everything happens at the Hilton thanks to its most stunning achievement, the magnificent Versailles-inspired Grand Ballroom.
And I remember there was an event in the Grand Ballroom of the Hilton, and I couldn't even tell you what the event was, but I just remember being taken by like, wow, check this out.
Because of its size, the Grand Ballroom has always attracted conventions, and in an interesting confluence of activities, fashion shows have also filled the Hilton's calendar of events.
During World War II, the hotel fell on some uncomfortable times, so it was taken over by the War Department, and it actually housed soldiers that were training up at the airfield.
And it stayed a military barracks until the latter years of World War II, when a gentleman by the name of S.A. Healy bought it for a fraction of the original building price of the Hilton.
The famous hotelier Conrad Hilton had long coveted the Stevens. In 1945, after years of frustrating negotiations, he finally bought the hotel and set out to make it the flagship property of his hotel empire. One of his first improvements was the installation of an ice stage in the Boulevard Room Supper Club, which began featuring elaborate ice shows in 1948. On November 19, 1951, the Stevens was renamed the Conrad Hilton. It was a glamorous time for the hotel and began a streak that continues today. All U.S. presidents, from Truman through the current President Bush, have stayed at the Hilton.
The hotel is well suited to hosting a president, and part of it is also because we have an experienced team. The Hilton Chicago handles on an annual basis half a dozen to a dozen head of state visits, and so we have the team when it comes to security, when it comes to protocol, when it comes to catering for the president, that knows how to get the job done.
Many of those employees spent entire careers at the Hilton. Famed banquet waiter Don Mavar joined his father as a banquet waiter in October 1951. And retired 50 years later with a plethora of wonderful stories.
The first time I served President Truman, I was just a rookie, and it was a buffet luncheon. It was in the Waldorf room. I remember like it was yesterday. And the fellow who was dishing up, of course, the president and his wife and Margaret didn't go through the buffet line, but everybody's nervous under those circumstances. And the guy put too much salad on the plate, and I'm putting it down next to the president, and I said, "Excuse me, sir," and a piece of the lettuce fell off, and he goes, "Oh, young man, won't even worry about it." And he instantly became my favorite president. Whenever I'm asked about serving 10 presidents from Truman to Clinton, I'd like to extend my two hands and say these two hands served 10 presidents of the United States. Some people in a lifetime never see a president. I'm very proud of that fact.
A less than proud moment in Chicago's history is the trouble surrounding the 1968 Democratic Convention. But a kind of silver lining takes over with regard to a favorite Hilton story of the time.
We all know what happened outside of the Hilton Chicago in Grant Park. And they were concerned. They were concerned that there was going to be an actual storm coming in through the front doors. So the call went out. We need to lock the front door. And they searched, and they searched, and they searched, and they realized that there were no keys to the Hilton Chicago. It opened in 1927, and the doors were never shut.
The Hilton, because of the wonderful backdrops that it offers, has been the scene of many movies, probably the most famous being The Fugitive. Almost the entire last hour of The Fugitive was filmed at the Hilton.
Movie star and Chicago native Joe Mantegna sees the Hilton as a constant throughout his life.
And I remember avidly, my dad driving into the Loop from the western, we lived on the west side of Chicago, driving into the Loop and then heading south on Lakeshore Drive. And I can remember that was like a signpost, being able, I'd see the Hilton and say, oh, there's that Hilton Hotel. And then to go from that to a point where I wound up being someone who had an opportunity to stay at the Hilton numerous times. The Hilton Hotel in Chicago has really been kind of has bracketed my life in a lot of ways.
The Hilton is a mecca for many things. It's a movie mecca. It's also a sports mecca. We have the Cubs fan convention on an annual basis. We have the Bears fans convention on an annual basis. And I'll let you in on a little secret. The Lovables practice at the Hilton Chicago.
Next, the future of these grand hotels that mean so much to Chicago and the world.
I think as long as there are people in Chicago that appreciate elegance, that appreciate opulence, that appreciate the finer things in life, the future of Chicago's grand hotels is secure.
Probably the most exciting thing that's happening is the $150 million restoration, literally returning the hotel to its original state of grandeur, but at the same time bringing it up to a level to compete with some of the more contemporary hotels.
We want to preserve what there is, what the people, what our guests love at the hotel, the tradition, the elegance. But at the same time, move forward and offer all the communication facilities, the technology, the development and training for all our team members. We believe that good service, friendliness, and a warm welcome will never go out of style.
People want to be at the Hilton because we're 80 years old on the outside, but on the inside we're a brand new hotel. The future is bright. We are the largest hotel in close proximity to McCormick Place, and we all know the importance that McCormick Place places within the city. People want to be at the Hilton because we're so close.
Today, the desirability of lodging at these hotels remains as strong as it did in the early decades of the last century. While sleeker, more minimalist hotels that are often devoid of character or personality now dominate the urban landscape, the Palmer House, the Drake, and the Hilton Chicago continue to endure for that cadre of cultured individuals who appreciate the finer things in life, who retain a sense of elegance, and who possess a desire to patronize a hotel where they can be part of a tradition of gracious hospitality. The allure of Chicago's grand hotels continues. Thanks for watching.